What's up everyone, it's Victon, back with another Path of Exile build guide. Today we're going to be going over a few different Carrion Golem builds that I plan on using for the 3-week Flashback League. I'll be transitioning between each version as I earn more and more currency. We're going to start off with a super cheap, almost completely solo self-found build that you can clear all the way to tier 16s with ease. It's been tried and tested and is super tanky, but also has enough damage to comfortably clear those high red tier maps. Best part is you can play this fully solo self-found in hardcore or just in normal softcore. The two items that we end up buying for those Trade League folks only cost 5 chaos each, so it is beyond cheap and my personal go-to for any league start going forward because of how cheap and how strong it is. From there, I'm also going to go over how I plan to transition into a medium budget build that will be focused on boss killing and farming currency. I'd say the medium budget build will likely be done for under 10 exalts in currency, and that is the absolute max, and we'll be able to easily clear all content in the game from fast and deathless Cyrus 8 and Uber Elder kills to AFK tier 16 blight farming, and even delving to up to 800 to 1000 pretty comfortably. I won't be going to the in-game version of the build that I plan to transition into in the 3-week Flashback League because I will be covering that version in a different video. That will most likely come out a few days after the event starts. Anyways, that was a brief introduction to what we'll be covering, but before I get into everything, if you end up enjoying this guide or any of my many other Path of Exile build guides, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Also, if you're interested in supporting the channel, check out my Patreon linked in the description below. Being a subscriber on there or on my Twitch chat is going to get you access to my sub-only Discord where I very frequently do personal build reviews, and we've just built a great community of folks just like you, ready and happy to help others with their builds. And to anyone on Patreon and Twitch supporting the channel, I can't thank you guys enough. I wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. All that being said, let's first jump into the skill tree, and then we're going to go over the gym links, and lastly we'll talk about all the gear we'll be using. So without further ado, let's jump into Path of Building. Alright, so first things first, we're going to be using the desktop app Path of Building. A link's going to be in the description for you to download it if you don't already have it. And it's very important to note that if you get an error in your Path of Building, it's because you're not using the Path of Building I have linked in the description. The one that we're going to be using is the Community Fork Path of Building, and it's updated more frequently, and overall it's just much better than the original. Once you get it, just copy the POB Pastebin link in the description of this video, and then we're going to open up the app, go to the top left here, and click Import Export Build. And then click import from Pastebin, and then we're going to paste that link into here and click import, and you should be good to go. So the way I do my POBs is I typically have a leveling guide built in so that you can see how to level it up from level 1 all the way up until a level 100 character. I have done that here, as you can see. Now what we're going to do is go over the general pathing that you're going to be taking, and we're going to discuss some of the bigger, more important nodes as we go along. First, you're going to be heading over to Enduring Bond, which is going to give you some nice minion damage and duration, which is going to help you with your summoned skeletons. They're going to last a little bit longer when you go with this wheel. You're going to be using those summoned skeletons until you could get Carrion Golems at level 34. And just a quick tip, your 4-link for skeletons will be Summoned Skeletons, Melee Fizz, Minion Damage, and if you do have that 4-link, we're going to throw in Melee Splash. Anyways, back to the skill tree. So after that, you're going to want to pick up some more skeleton and zombies, and just some more life. From there, we're going to head up and we're going to grab another zombie and skeleton, as well as +1 to max Spectre. You won't be using your Spectres until Act 7 in Ashen Fields, when you could pick up the Carnage and Hove Chieftains. At least that's what I do. If you really want, you can use Slave Drivers from Act 5 that control blocks for a bit of extra damage. Up to you, just know that they do tend to die a lot. Also note here that you're going to get this Dex node if you do need the extra Dex. From there, we're going to grab some life, and then we're going to go up to the +1 to maximum Golem node. Around this time, you're going to be hitting level 34 and getting your first Ascendancy point, which is going to give you another Golem, bringing you up to a total of 3 carried Golems to start your build off with. You're going to start doing some serious damage at this point and really start crushing those levels. From there, we just head over and grab Ravenous Horde, which is going to be the highest DPS node for minions on the tree, so a pretty nice pickup early on. Next, we're going to get some life nodes as well as some jewel sockets if you found a jewel or two by then. If not, just go ahead and skip those jewel sockets. As far as jewels specifically, I'd suggest going for elemental resistance jewels while we're in the league starter version of your build. From there, we're just going to go up and start heading down the tree and grab some minion damage nodes and some life nodes. And next, we're going to grab some more minion damage nodes. And after that, we're going to head down and grab some really great life nodes. From there, we're really going to start picking up lots of life nodes, which is going to help us tremendously in a new, fresh league. After that, we're going to pick up extra minion damage nodes, and then lastly, we're going to fill out with some more life nodes to end the build around level 95. At this point, or even a bit before, you can start transitioning your gear into what I call the medium budget build. First though, before we go over the medium budget build, let's first go over the gear and the gym links for the budget version. For gear, it's actually very straightforward since, like I mentioned earlier, this can be done fully solo self-found. Basically, just get as much life and resistance on your gear as possible. Make sure not to neglect chaos resistance as well. The easiest way to get chaos resistance capped is to eventually use your bench craft and craft, for example, 15% lightning and chaos resistance, or whatever elemental resistance you need. Doing that on several of your items as well as getting chaos resistance naturally on at least 1 or 2 items usually helps you cap out your chaos resistance, and it is pretty huge defense wise. I'd also suggest a Stygian Vise belt so you can put an abyssal jewel in there, and ideally you want one with life, and minions deal 20% increased damage if you used a minion skill recently, and even better if you can get one with minion blind chance on hit as well. For your amulet, it also helps to make sure you have some dex on there for the base or in general somewhere on your gear, because you will be needing a good bit of dex for this build. And for your amulet anointment, you're going to want to go with Grave Intentions for some nice minion defenses to help them die a whole lot less. Now for the weapons, if you're in a trade league, you're going to want to buy 2 clay shapers, or 1 and a shield if you prefer. Clay shapers are usually only about 5 chaos even at the start of league, so it's incredibly cheap and the only items that you're going to need to buy for this budget version of the build. We're not purchasing those expensive primordial jewels just yet because honestly it's not even that needed until you start farming those in-game bosses. For those of you that are playing solo self-found, what I'd suggest is a Convoking Wand or any wand with minion damage on it. And remember, you can use Essences of Fear to add minion damage onto any weapon. It gives a great chunk of damage doing that. You can also even add minion damage onto claws or daggers or any weapon that wouldn't normally get it. This is really good for claws that have life gain on hit when you're going cast while channeling Cyclone and Flesh Offering or Bone Offering, but that's just another option and we're actually not going to do that on this build specifically, just a good little tip. For your flask, pretty simple here too. I just suggest getting Freeze, Curse, and Bleed immunity between your flasks. Make sure you get those. I typically go with a Quartz, Basalt, or Granite, Quicksilver, and Jade flask, as well as a Life flask. And you can even try and roll on the Of Animation mod to get the life regen from your flask applied to your minions to help out with their survivability if you need to. It's not a whole lot of life that they're going to be able to regen via your flasks, but it's a nice little bit on the side that just helps out. And like I mentioned earlier, for our jewels, we're just going to want to get jewels with elemental resistances to help us be able to get gear with higher life since we're not worried so much about capping our resistances. Obviously, getting ones with minion damage on it as well is ideal. And honestly, that's it for the budget gear section. You end up with about 6.5k life, so a pretty decent life pool for basically solo self-found gear. Now for our gym links, to start we're obviously going to have Carrion Golems, and we're going to be using Multi-Strike, Brutality, Impale, and a minion damage. If you're lucky enough to grab a 6th link early on, you're going to also want to throw on Melee Physical as your 6th link. Now we have our zombies and our helmet next. We're going to go with Raised Zombie, Maim for some extra damage for our Carrion Golems, Meat Shield to help those zombies survive, and Feeding Frenzy for a really strong DPS buff to your Carrion Golems. It's important to keep your zombies in your helmet because eventually you want a helmet with plus to minion gem levels, and minions are supported by a 16 to 20 minion gem. We're going to go over that more in the gear section, so we'll come back on that. For our buffs, we go with Pride, Flesh and Stone, and we're going to be using Sand Stance for defenses or Blood Stance for a DPS boost near bosses. Then we're going to have Generosity linked to a Dread Banner for minion impale chance. For one of our 2 weapons, we're going to want to go with Flesh Offering, Convocation, and Vulnerability. Now, Vulnerability will of course be used as your curse, but also a good way of guiding your Carrion Golems to attack certain targets. It acts like an attack this button, so it's very useful in that regards, as well as being a very strong curse. From there, we're going to have Race Spectre linked to a Blood Magic. For your Spectres, you're going to want 1 Carnage Chieftain and 1 Host Chieftain, which are both going to come from Act 7, the Ashen Fields. Once you get your 3rd Spectre, you're going to want to go with a They of Toll, which can be found in Toll's Domain Breachstone. In that same 4-link, but not necessarily linked to those two, you're going to want to have a cast when damage taken at level 3 and an immortal call at level 5. That's going to be a really nice defensive boost for you. Lastly here, you're going to want to go with a Vol Molten Shell or just Molten Shell and throw that on your left click here to have it automatically cast as much as possible. And then you're also going to want to have a Flame Dash and a Second Wind, and those 3 will be on your second weapon. And that's it for the gym links on the budget version, so let's quickly talk about the Ascendancies, which are actually going to be the same on both versions of this build. You're of course going to be going Elementalist. This is the cheapest option compared to going a low life Necromancer, which can be pretty pricey at the start of a league. My plan for any league start going forward is I'm going to be playing an Elementalist Carrion Golem build as a life character, and then once I build up the currency, I'm going to switch over to a low life Necromancer version. That's just my personal style. You can stay life if you want. It's a totally fine build and is still very, very strong. The life version on the budget and medium version of this build are super cheap and still incredibly strong, which is why I'm going to start out with them first. Anyways, back to the Ascendancy. You're first going to grab Liege of the Primordial for +1 to maximum Golem, and some nice Golem buff effect as well. Second, you're going to get Elemancer for another +1 to maximum Golems and even more buff effect, as well as full Elemental Ailment Immunity, which is crazy strong defensive boost. So you'll never be frozen, ignited, shocked, chilled, none of that. It's extremely strong. And like I mentioned, that's the same nodes for both the budget and the medium budget versions of the build. Alright, so speaking of, next let's go over the tree for the medium budget version. I won't have a leveling guide on this one because you will already have leveled up with the last version. You're going to be switching over to this version most likely in the late 80s to early 90s, basically when you can get access to your set of Primordial Jewels and the Anima Stone. Once you have those, it's time to switch over and start doing 5 times the damage. What I will do here though is I'm going to go over the big changes between the versions in the skill tree. Honestly, it's not too much though, most of it is the same. But the big changes you can see here are that we are obviously getting a single large cluster jewel and 2 medium cluster jewels. For the large cluster jewel, you're going to want something with at least Rotten Claws. This is going to get your Carrion Golems to 95% Impale chance, which boosts their DPS a ton. Ideally, you'd also want Renewal as well for a very nice damage boost and also some nice minion life regen. For our 2 medium jewels, you actually want the same thing for both of them. We're going to be going with Dread March for a ton of minion survivability, which is fantastic, especially in the early parts of the league. And then we're going to go with Renewal again for even more minion damage. Now, in order to get these cluster jewels, you're going to have to drop some life nodes, but no worries, you still end up with 5.8k life and have a ton more defenses elsewhere, so it's completely fine. Okay, so now the most expensive part of the medium budget version and what you should save up for immediately after buying your 2 clay shapers are the Primordial Jewels. First, we're going to have a Primordial Eminence, and then we're going to purchase a Primordial Harmony, and then we're going to purchase a Primordial Might. And lastly, you're going to need to buy all 3 of those again and then vendor them, and out pops an Anima Stone. This is the big one. That's going to give you +2 to maximum Golems. This is what allows us to run 4 Carrion Golems, 1 Stone Golem, which is going to be really great for life regen, and 1 Chaos Golem, which is going to get us up to about 73% physical damage reduction without even trying. As far as your other jewels, what you're going to want to go with alongside the Primordial Jewels, we're actually going to be going for a Fortress of Covenant for minion damage and survivability, as well as a Quickening Covenant for even more minion damage and survivability. Getting these 2 jewels basically make your minions not die anymore, with all that attack and spell block, so it's very strong and pretty cheap, so a great early pickup. And that's really it for the tree, so let's go ahead and talk about the gem links now, since it is just slightly different than the budget version. Okay, so Carrion Golem links remain the same here with Carrion Golems, Impale, Brutality, Multi-Strike, Minion Damage, and Melee Fizz as your 6th link. Now remember that you can buy a very cheap 6th link early in the league. Rares can sometimes drop Corrupted as 6 links, which mostly are pretty bad because you can't change those colors on them very easily. As long as you search on the trade website for 2 blue sockets, 3 red sockets, and a green socket, you can typically find a pretty cheap Corrupted 6 link that sometimes even has some pretty decent stats on it. This would be my suggestion for your first cheap and easy 6 link. Now for your helmet, slight changes here. We're going to have Ray Spectre, Raised Zombie, Meat Shield, and Blood Magic. Same specters as the budget version, we're going to go with 1 Host Chieftain, 1 Carnage Chieftain, and 1 They of Toll. Next, for our buffs, we actually do try and get an unset ring here so we can socket our Pride into it. Ideally, you'd want a ring with plus to maximum level of socketed gems, but if you can't get that and you can only get life and resistances, that is totally fine too. If you plan on trying to use Animate Guardian, you should get a second unset ring and put the Animate Guardian in there. Same thing, get one with plus to maximum levels of socketed gems and get that Animate Guardian some more life. For your next set of buffs, we're going to be going with Summon Skitterbots, Dread Banner, and Generosity. Next, we have our support gems. We're going to have Summon Chaos Golem, Feeding Frenzy, Stone Golem, and Maim. For our last 4-link here, we're going to have Molten Shell, which is ideally going to be a Vol Molten Shell, and from there we're going to have Frostwall and Cast when damage taken. Now, this is for a Blight AFK farming setup. If you're not planning on running Blight maps, then I'd take out the Cast when damage taken and replace that with Vulnerability when you're running regular maps. Lastly, for our second weapon, we're going to have Flame Dash, Convocation, and Flesh Offering. And that's it for our links, so let's go ahead and go over the gear now. Alright, so for the gear, what I've done with this version of the build is still try and keep everything as low as possible with costs, so we're maintaining as much DPS and survivability as possible while staying low on budget. For our weapon, we're going to upgrade our Clay Shaper to a Cold Iron Point Dagger, which is going to give all physical spells +3 to level, so everything from our Carrion Golems, to our Pride buff, even to our Animate Guardian. This is a super strong item and is better than a Clay Shaper even though you're losing that +1 to maximum Golem. Next, for our shield, we're going to go with a Sapphire's Frame. I actually saw the Game Report using the shield on his stream one day and I absolutely love the idea of it, so I started using it on my build and I loved it, so props to him for using that one. Basically, this just gives you +4 to all of your maximum resistances, which even includes Chaos Resistance. So you're going to have 79 Fire, Cold, and Lightning, and Chaos Resistance. It's a super strong item. These are super cheap as well, so you can actually get one with a pretty good corruption on it. Like mine, I got one with 6% maximum life. From there, we're just going to get a helmet with +2 or +3 levels of minion gems, as well as socketed gems are supported by minion life gem, ideally up to a level 20. This gives a huge defensive boost to your specters and to your zombies. You can roll these yourself by getting an Elder Helmet base and using Bound Fossils on it. Just note that if you want that +3 to gems, you're going to need an eye level 86 helmet, and those can be a bit pricey, so I personally stick with the +2 and it is totally fine. As far as enchants for your helmet, the best enchant is actually increased Flesh Offering attack speed, but Carrion Golem damage works just fine too, or even Carrion Golem, Stone Golem, or Chaos Golem buff effect. From there, I got a body armor that might seem pretty crazy, but typically body armors like this are not that expensive. They're going to have life and resistances, and they're pretty affordable at only like, I would say 10 exalts or so for a 6-link. That compared to a Brass Dome 6-link, which around the same time would be upwards of 20 exalts in the beginning of the league. Cheaper option will also be a basic 6-link armor with some life and resistances, or even a 6-link Wall of Brambles, which should be very cheap. For our gloves, we're going to go with a pretty simple pair here with just life and some chaos resistance, and then we went ahead and crafted some minion damage on it as well, which is a prefix. For our boots, again, super simple, just life and resistances with some chaos resistance, and then I crafted on movement speed. Crafting on the movement speed yourself usually saves a ton of currency, since a pair of boots like this with movement speed already on it will likely be much more expensive instead of getting a pair like this and crafting it yourself. For our amulet, we're going to go with a Jinxed Juju. This guy gives you a huge defensive boost, making damage be taken from your specters before you, and it also gives you some nice chaos resistance as well as aura effect. These are typically very cheap. For the amulet anointment, I went with Grave Intentions for some nice minion defenses. For your 2 rings, like I mentioned earlier, try and get unset rings, and we're just going to have some life on them as well as some resistances, and an open suffix if you can, so we can craft on +1 to minimum endurance charges. Now, you'll need at least 1 unset ring so you can use Pride in it, but you can skip that second unset ring if you don't plan on using Animate Guardian. For our belt, we're going to have a super cheap Darkness Enthroned with the Abyssal Jewels inside of it. This right here is a good example of what you're looking at for the jewel. It has life, minions deal 20% increased damage if you used a minion skill recently, and some minion physical damage as well. If you can't get all 3 of those, don't worry, just at least get the life and the minions deal increased damage. As far as your flasks, you want a Jade, Quicksilver, and Quartz flask with Freeze, Curse, and Bleed immunity between the three, and we're going to grab a Rumi's Concoction for the spell block and armor, and then we're going to pick up a Blood of the Karui for an insane instant full heal. Since we have max chaos resistance, the chaos damage it makes us take is basically nothing, so absolutely no worries there. And that's it really for the medium budget version of the build. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, this is actually going to be my league starter for the upcoming 3-week Flashback League, and I plan on doing the budget version and then transitioning into the medium budget version like I've gone over here. I think using the strategy for my build is going to be incredibly strong and allow for a super strong early leveling process that transitions really nice into an amazing boss killer and in-game content character. I actually plan on using this character alongside a new strategy for making some insane amounts of early currency in a league, and I think this Carrion Golem build specifically is going to be seriously amazing for it and allow me for a ton of currency very early on, which is going to help skyrocket my build's potential. If you're interested in hearing about that new currency making strategy, do come check out my stream on Twitch, where I will be streaming the vast majority of the 3-week league. My Twitch channel is linked below in the video description. But yeah, I hope you guys learned some things, and if y'all end up playing this build, I hope you guys enjoy it and it works out for y'all. If you end up enjoying this guide, do hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more guides just like this. Also, consider supporting the channel on Patreon or on my Twitch channel, both of which will be linked in the description below. Being a sub on either of those, like I mentioned earlier, is going to get you access to my sub-only Discord, where we've built an awesome community, and I'm always in there helping people out and doing individual build reviews. That's all I got for this one, guys. I hope I catch y'all in the 3-week league event. Thanks, everyone, and I will catch y'all in the next one.